When I handed her that red lace lingerie, in front of her whole family, the color drained from her face faster than the blood rushed to mine. That moment still sits in my memory like a stone at the bottom of a quiet lake. Heavy, cold, unmoving. Some people say silence is peaceful, but that kind of silence, the one that falls right before the world flips upside down, has a pulse of its own. You can feel it in your teeth, behind your eyes, everywhere. I remember the way the chandelier lights hit the satin tablecloths, how the smell of rosewater and baked pastries filled the room, and how everyone, every auntie, uncle, cousin, coworker, even the groom-to-be, froze mid-smile. But that was the end of the story. To understand how I ended up standing in the middle of a celebration holding another woman's lingerie, you have to understand where I came from, and who I used to be before betrayal reshaped my bones. My name is Lena, and before everything fell apart, my life was simple in the way a quiet street is simple, until you realize it's only quiet because everyone's behind closed doors. I grew up believing that love, real love, was built in the kitchen, with warm meals, soft mornings, and a gentle voice calling your name. So when I married Michael, I tried to build our life exactly that way. Our home on Willow Street wasn't big or fancy, but it had charm, a little creaking in the hardwood floors, a window that stuck when it rained, and a backyard where I'd planted lavender because I liked the smell. Every evening at sunset, the house glowed in a warm amber that made even our old couch look romantic. My days started before the sun did. I'd slip into my slippers, tie my hair in a scarf, and head to the kitchen where the kettle always seemed to be waiting for me. The soft whistle of boiling water, the clink of ceramic mugs, the smell of cinnamon oatmeal, those were the rhythms I lived by. Michael, my husband, would come downstairs exactly at 7:40. Not 7:39, not 7:41. He was a man. Made of routine. He'd tug at his tie, twice, always twice, before grabbing the mug I placed beside his briefcase. "Morning, Lena," he'd say, voice rough, eyes soft, and I would reply with something simple like, "Your oatmeal's ready," even though what I really meant was, "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you came home." Small things, you know, the kind couples take for granted. Sometimes he'd kiss my cheek, sometimes he'd forget, and I would tell myself it didn't matter. Love is not measured by the number of kisses, I'd say. It's measured by showing up, and he did show up, at least physically. After he left for work, I'd tidy the kitchen, grab my tote bag, and head to the boutique I co-owned with my friend Carol. Running that little store was the pride of my life. We sold dresses, wedding gowns, cocktail dresses, prom outfits, garments made for moments people would remember forever. I like to think we stitched little bits of hope into the fabric. On weekdays, I'd watch mothers fuss over their daughters' prom dresses, or bridesmaids debate about matching colors. I'd listen to the same stories told in slightly different ways. Fear, excitement, dreams, all wrapped up in chiffon and satin. Meanwhile, Michael worked in corporate finance, the kind of job with long hours, endless coffee, and coworkers he talked about more than he talked about his family. There was one name he mentioned more than the rest, Hannah. I didn't think anything of her at first. He described her like a helpful coworker, sharp, organized, quick with numbers. She saved us from a disaster in the quarterly report, he once said. "She's really dedicated," he said another time. "She's young, but she's got potential." I was proud of him for having a good team. I never felt threatened. Why would I? We had a comfortable marriage. We had routines. We had trust. Or, I thought we did. Our evenings were gentle. I'd cook, slow-roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, sautéed green beans, and Michael would eat with the appetite of a man who hadn't seen real food all day. After dinner, he'd sit on the couch and scroll through his phone while I curled up beside him with a book I never fully read. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. But silence isn't always a warning sign. Sometimes it's just silence. On weekends, we'd run errands, clean the house, visit his mother for lunch. And every so often, I'd get a text from Michael. "Team dinner tonight, don't wait up." He'd come home smelling faintly of wine and work stress. He'd kiss my forehead and go straight to bed. Life felt stable, predictable, safe. And maybe that was my mistake. I mistook routine for loyalty. I mistook familiarity for love. If you'd asked me then if I trusted my husband, I would have laughed. Of course I did. With my whole heart, with everything I had. But life has a way of revealing truths in the smallest, quietest moments. Little shifts you don't catch at first. Before the confrontation, before the red lace, before the entire hall went silent at that engagement party, there was one tiny thing, just one small detail that nudged my world off balance. And even then, I told myself it was nothing. How wrong I was. Not the kind you notice right away, but the kind that lingers in the air long after the person has left. Soft, powdery, a little too sweet. I smelled it the night Michael came home late from his team dinner. He walked past me toward the hallway, and something about the air shifted, like he was carrying someone else's perfume on his clothes. It wasn't mine. I wore warm scents, vanilla, amber, sandalwood. This was floral, young, too bright, but I didn't say anything. A wife who trusts her husband doesn't question every little smell. Instead, I told myself he probably hugged a coworker goodbye, or maybe someone spilled something in the restaurant. Life is full of explanations when you're trying hard not to ask the real questions. Still, it lingered somewhere inside me, like a splinter under the skin. Few days later, I found the second clue. Not because I was snooping, but because life placed it directly in my path. I was gathering laundry in our bedroom, humming to myself, when I noticed something unusual at the bottom of the hamper, a shirt of Michael's inside out, with a faint smear of lipstick near the collar. Not my shade. I don't even own anything that color. I stared at it for a long moment. Just stared. The room felt suddenly too quiet, like even the hum of the ceiling fan paused to watch what I'd do next. I felt a tightness in my throat. Not pain, but something sharp and unspoken. A fear you can't quite name yet. I picked up the shirt, ran my thumb across the stain, and told myself the most generous lie I could think of. It's probably from a hug at work, or something at the office party. But there hadn't been an office party. Still, I folded the shirt without washing it. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof of something I wasn't ready to admit. That night at dinner, I watched him carefully, not as a wife watches her husband, but as a stranger trying to understand the character in front of her. His eyes didn't meet mine as often. His laughter felt forced. He moved his phone face down on the table, something he never used to do. He noticed me watching and smiled in that tight, polite way he reserved for uncomfortable conversations. "You okay, Lena?" he asked, reaching for his water. "Just tired," I said. And that was the truth. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. Tired of convincing myself everything was normal when something in my body knew better. It wasn't one big thing, it was death by 1,000 tiny changes. He started working late more often. His shirts smelled faintly of perfume more frequently. He showered as soon as he got home, sometimes even before saying hello. He turned his notifications off. He kept his phone in his pocket, even during dinner. He stopped leaving it on the nightstand. He stopped leaving it anywhere. One morning as he got dressed, he hummed a tune I didn't recognize. Something upbeat, youthful. Not the old blues he normally played during his morning routine. "New song?" I asked casually. "Oh, yeah, just something I heard somewhere," he mumbled, fumbling with his tie. Somewhere. People don't suddenly pick up new songs from thin air, but I let it go. Because denial is a warm blanket. Heavy, comforting, and suffocating. My friend Carol noticed something was off before I even admitted it out loud. "You've been quiet lately," she said one afternoon while we unpacked spring dresses at the boutique. "Just tired," I repeated, the same line I'd used on Michael. Carol stopped folding, looked directly at me, and asked, "Is everything okay at home?" And for a second, a brief, flickering second, I almost told her. But shame is a stubborn thing. We don't like to admit we're losing something we thought we'd secured. So I shook my head, smiled, and changed the subject. The third clue, the one I couldn't ignore, it happened the following Saturday. Michael told me he had a work brunch with a few clients and that it might run long. He dressed nicely, nicer than usual, but I didn't comment on it. I just watched him adjust his cufflinks, watched the way he seemed excited, almost nervous. He smelled good, too good. When he left the house, something inside me deflated. I spent the first hour cleaning the living room, the second hour reorganizing the kitchen cabinets, and by the third hour, I told myself to stop spiraling. Then I heard a soft buzz. His tablet, left on the kitchen counter. He never used it much, mostly for work documents and random browsing. I shouldn't have touched it, I know that. But my hands moved before my mind did. When I pressed the home button, a notification lit up the screen. "Hannah, are we still on for 1 p.m.? Can't stop thinking about you." My whole body froze. I read the message once, then again slower. The words felt like needles beneath my skin. Everything inside me went still, my breath, my thoughts, my heartbeat. Like the world narrowed to a single point, her name. Hannah, the coworker he mentioned, the girl with the bright laugh, the one who brought expensive wine to our housewarming, the one he talked about in passing like she was background noise, and she couldn't stop thinking about him. My hands trembled so violently the tablet almost slipped from my grasp. There was more, other notifications, other messages, but I couldn't swipe. I couldn't breathe. The truth wasn't a shock, it was a confirmation, a puzzle piece snapping into place. My ears rang, my vision blurred. The room felt too small, too hot, too quiet. It wasn't suspicion anymore, it wasn't doubt, it was certainty, and certainty has a way of hollowing you out in a single moment. That was the day I realized my marriage had already left me long before I caught up to its footsteps. I don't remember sitting down, but I found myself in the kitchen chair, staring at the tablet like it was a doorway to a life I never wanted to enter. My breath came in shallow pulls, like the air had thickened around me. I kept telling myself, "You're stronger than this, Lena. You're stronger than this, but strength feels different when your heart is breaking quietly inside your chest." I finally forced my fingers to unlock the tablet fully, and that's when the floodgate opened. There wasn't just one message, there were dozens, weeks of them, maybe months. "Last night was amazing. I can still feel your hands on me. Wish I was waking up next to you instead. Did your wife notice anything? Love you. Miss you. Can't wait to see you again." Those words felt like knives sliding under my skin, each one slicing through whatever pieces of trust I had left. But one message, one short, cruel message, broke something inside me beyond repair. "Bought you something. You'll look perfect in red." Red. The color of temptation, the color of betrayal, the color I would later place in her hands in front of her entire family. But at that moment, all I could do was stare. My fingers went numb. My throat burned. I scrolled further. Pictures. Not nude, nothing explicit, but intimate. Their hands intertwined, a kiss on his cheek, their legs touching under a restaurant table. Him smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in a very long time. Then, a receipt, a screenshot of a purchase confirmation. Red lingerie, silk, lace, expensive, next day shipping. My eyes blurred with tears I didn't even feel coming. Some fell onto the screen, distorting the words. Others slid down my cheeks silently. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart. I simply broke inwardly, quietly, without ceremony. I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had served him breakfast every morning, the counters where he had leaned, the stove where I cooked for him, the table where we shared meals I prepared with love. And suddenly, it all felt tainted. Everything in that house felt borrowed, like I had been living in a life on loan, one that could be taken back at any moment. When Michael came home later that evening, humming that same upbeat tune, the entire house felt different. Or maybe I felt different inside it. He walked in, loosened his tie, and glanced toward me with that casual ease of a man who assumes his secrets are safe. "Hey, sweetheart. Sorry I'm late. Meeting ran long," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. I turned my head just enough for his lips to meet air, his brows pulled together. "Something wrong?" "Everything, Michael. Everything is wrong." But the words didn't leave my mouth. Not yet. I didn't want a shouting match. I didn't want his excuses. I didn't want to hear lies spill from a mouth that once whispered promises to me. So I simply said, "I'm tired," the same lie I'd used for weeks. He stared at me for a moment, searching for something in my face. Maybe guilt flickered in his eyes, I'm not sure. But he didn't push. He walked past me toward the shower, humming. Again. I watched him disappear down the hallway, my nails digging into my palms. I wasn't ready to confront him, not until I understood just how deep this betrayal went. The next morning, he left early for a client meeting. I waited 30 minutes after the door shut before walking into our bedroom. I opened his closet, checked his drawers, not to be invasive, just to find truth. And there it was, tucked behind his winter sweaters inside a sleek black box, the companion piece to the red lingerie he bought her. A matching robe, red satin, delicate, seductive. I pulled it out gently, like it might crumble under my touch. My hands shook as I held it up to the light. It was beautiful. Painfully so. Not something a man buys for a coworker. Not something a husband hides unless he knows it's wrong. The tag was still on it, pricey, lavish, the kind of gift he had never ever bought for me. I pressed the robe to my chest, eyes closing, heart squeezing painfully. All the late nights, all the new songs, all the perfume, all the excuses. It all made sense now. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the robe pooling in my lap like spilled wine, and whispered to myself, he gave her what belonged to me, not just the robe, not just his time, but his tenderness, his attention, his laughter, his desire. Pieces of him I had loved, cherished, nurtured, pieces he had handed to someone else. I don't know how long I sat there, minutes, hours. Time didn't exist in that moment, but at some point, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. A calm, steady clarity that told me, pain doesn't get the final word. You do. I folded the robe gently, placed it back in the box, closed the lid. Then I stood, smoothed my hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired, my heart was bruised, but there was something new in my reflection, something determined. There was going to be a confrontation, but not in my home, not in private, not where he could twist the story or hide behind excuses. No, this wound deserved the light. The truth deserved air. And the moment to reveal everything came sooner than I expected. Delivered to me in the form of a cream-colored invitation, sitting on our dining table later that afternoon. Hannah's family was hosting her sister's engagement luncheon. Michael had RSVP'd for both of us. I stared at the invitation, then at the box containing the red lingerie sitting quietly in his closet. A plan began to form, slowly, naturally, like a storm gathering over calm water, and for the first time in weeks I felt something close to strength. The day of the luncheon arrived with an uneasy kind of beauty. Sunlight fell through the curtains of my bedroom, soft and deceptive, as if nothing had happened at all. Outside, the birds sang, children laughed, and the world went about its normal rhythm, completely unaware of the storm I carried inside me. I stood in front of my closet, staring at my own reflection. My dress was modest, cream-colored, with lace details at the sleeves, perfectly appropriate for a family gathering but understated enough to not draw unnecessary attention. My heart pounded in anticipation, not for the party itself, but for what I carried in my bag. Red, silk, lace. Michael's betrayal, wrapped in temptation, folded neatly in a small gift bag with tissue paper peeking out like the first warning flags before a hurricane. I had rehearsed my steps 100 times in my head, not in anger, not exactly, but in careful precision. This wasn't about vengeance for vengeance's sake. This was about clarity, about showing the truth where it could not be ignored. The drive to Hannah's family home was quiet. Michael sat beside me, chatting about trivial things, his voice cheerful, oblivious. I stared straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The scent of the leather seats mixed with the faint trace of his cologne, the same scent I had first noticed weeks ago. How long had she smelled like this in? Your arms? I thought. How many smiles were hers that should have been mine? I didn't speak. I didn't answer him. His words flowed over me like water over stones. I had become too practiced at hiding the storm inside me. My pulse remained steady, my face calm. The house was buzzing with activity when we arrived. Decorations in soft pastels, silverware gleaming, the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh bread filling the air. Laughter and music mixed into a warm haze that contrasted sharply with the tension coiled in my chest. I followed Michael inside, keeping my bag close, feeling every gaze brush against me without yet knowing the weight it would carry in moments to come. Hannah's family greeted us warmly, cheerful, unsuspecting. Her mother's voice was bright, her father jovial, her sister practically glowing in the excitement of her engagement. Hannah appeared from the kitchen wearing a navy blue dress, the kind that hugged her just right and made her look effortlessly polished. She smiled at me politely, an edge of familiarity in her tone that now felt sinister. I returned the smile, soft and measured. We exchanged pleasantries, chatted about the food, complimented the decor. All the while, my fingers tightened around the bag hidden beneath my arm. I could feel the heat of the red fabric pressing through the paper. I waited for the right moment, a lull in conversation, a break in the laughter, something that would make the attention turn, without me needing to shout or storm in. And then, there it was. Hannah's sister had gone to refill glasses, aunties were comparing dresses, even the photographer had paused to check his camera settings. The room's rhythm shifted, and I knew this was my opening. I cleared my throat softly, and the chatter quieted slightly. All eyes turned toward me. Not because I demanded it, but because people naturally sense when something significant is about to happen. "Hannah," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. She looked at me with curiosity, a smile still on her lips. "Yes?" she asked. I reached into my bag and produced the gift bag. Her name was printed in gold on the card attached. I handed it to her slowly, deliberately, making sure she could feel the weight in her hands. She furrowed her brow. "Oh, this isn't mine," she stammered, lifting the tissue paper to peek inside. Her eyes widened almost instantly. Red silk and lace glimmered under the soft light. The color was more vivid, more alive than anything else in the room. The reality of it hit her before the words could form. This was not just a gift, this was proof. I stayed silent. My calmness became louder than any accusation I could make. Her hands trembled. The room had gone quiet, and now I could hear every heartbeat, every small shift of movement. My husband, finally noticing the tension, took a step forward. "Lena, what are you doing?" he asked, voice sharp, defensive. I looked at him once, and then back at her. "This is yours, isn't it?" I said softly. "I think you left it behind." Hannah's face turned pale. Her voice wavered as she tried to explain, but the words caught in her throat. There were gasps from relatives nearby, whispers spreading like wildfire. Her mother's eyes darted between us, her sister froze in mid-step, and even the photographer lowered his camera, sensing the moment was too raw to capture without consent. Michael's jaw tightened. "Lena, it's not—" I held up a finger, still calm. "Let's not lie in front of everyone. You'll have plenty of time for that later." The red lingerie sat between us now, a small bundle with a huge weight. A symbol of deceit, yes, but also a mirror showing each of us exactly who we were. Hannah's voice cracked. I didn't know. No one is pretending anymore," I said. "It's all here, and it's all been hiding in plain sight." The room had shifted entirely. Where before there was celebration and casual chatter, now there was tension, disbelief, and shock. Family members whispered behind their hands, some angry, some confused. Michael's co-workers, who were also present, looked between us, mouths open. The air felt thick, like velvet stretched over fire. I could see Hannah shrink, retreat, as if trying to melt into the polished floorboards. My husband's confident posture faltered. Even the engaged couple, who had been laughing and holding hands, looked on with stunned silence. And through it all, I remained steady. Not because I wasn't hurt, oh, I was, but because clarity had replaced my rage. My pain had transformed into action. In that moment, I realized something important. Truth has a presence. It doesn't yell, it doesn't threaten. It simply exists. And when you place it carefully, deliberately, it commands attention without a single raised voice. The red lingerie was no longer just fabric. It was the revelation everyone needed to see. The silence in the room stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable, until someone finally spoke. Aunt Marlene, Hannah's mother, had a hand pressed to her chest, eyes wide as if she'd been punched. "Oh my, Hannah," she whispered, voice trembling. Hannah couldn't meet anyone's gaze. Her hands clutched the red lingerie like it might disappear if she held it tighter. Her face was pale, lips quivering. Michael, for the first time that day, looked small. Not the proud, untouchable man I'd married, the one who smiled easily, commanded respect in a room, but vulnerable, exposed. His cheeks flushed, and his throat moved as if he wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "You," Aunt Marlene began, but trailed off, looking at him with disbelief and hurt mingled into one. I stayed calm. My chest ached, but my voice was steady. "It's true," I said softly. "All of it. I found the messages. I found the receipts. Everything is here." I gestured subtly to the lingerie. Nothing left to hide. There was a sharp intake of breath from someone behind us. Probably Hannah's sister, the one whose engagement we were technically celebrating. Even the photographer, who had tried to remain invisible, looked ready to pack up and leave. Hannah finally found a shaky voice. I didn't know it would. I didn't know he. It doesn't matter what you knew or didn't know," I said. "What matters is what's real. And this," I gestured again to the red lingerie, "is real, and it belongs in the open now." The room fractured into whispers and sideways glances. People I barely knew leaned in to hear what had happened. I noticed subtle shifts: cousins gripping each other's hands, aunts shaking their heads, uncles clearing their throats. One of Hannah's cousins muttered, "I can't believe, after everything." Her father's face hardened. "Michael, is this true?" Michael opened his mouth, closed it, then repeated the process like a fish out of water. "Lena, it's not like that." But everyone could see it. Every gesture, every lingering look, every hesitation spoke louder than any defense he could muster. And Hannah? She was shrinking before our eyes. One moment she was upright and confident, the next her shoulders sagged, her hands twisting in her lap. The bravado she carried into the room, her careful posture, her smile, the way she laughed at all the right moments, crumbled. Her mother finally stepped forward, voice shaking with disappointment and anger. "Hannah, you need to leave." Hannah stammered, I don't. "You need to leave," her mother repeated, firmer this time. The room collectively leaned in, watching the scene unfold like a slow-motion domino effect. Michael tried to explain himself, but the truth had already spoken louder than his words could. I watched as respect and admiration evaporated from the room like mist. The colleagues, some of whom had been in the luncheon, exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the situation was far more than workplace gossip. I could see it in their eyes, a man who had betrayed the trust of those closest to him. And I realized even more sharply that betrayal isn't private. It spills. It stains everything around it. One of Hannah's uncles finally spoke, voice low but cutting. "A man who treats his wife like that, he's not welcome here." The words landed like bricks. Michael's lips parted, but no defense came. He was cornered, exposed, and the social consequences of his actions were immediate. I had no intention of humiliating him, but the public acknowledgement of the betrayal was necessary. People need to see truth when it matters most, and now everyone did. Hannah, too, faced the consequences. Her friends in attendance couldn't hide their shock. Some looked away, others whispered. The young woman who had carried herself so confidently now looked like a child caught in a lie. It struck me, in that moment, how betrayal affects everyone. Not just the spouse, not just the lover. The ripple reaches family, friends, coworkers, everyone who trusts the people involved. Her reputation, carefully curated over months, maybe years, crumbled in minutes. I didn't gloat, I didn't smile, I simply observed. Reality has a way of balancing itself, if you let it. And me, I was calm, collected. But beneath that, I felt the tremor of sadness, of loss, of grief. Not just grief for the marriage I had thought was secure, but for the illusions I had lived under, of trust, of loyalty, of love. I realized something crucial that day. Confrontation doesn't have to be cruel to be effective. Truth is naturally powerful. When you allow reality to speak for itself, there's no need for shouting, no need for threats, no need for melodrama. All it took was courage, the courage to show the evidence, to step into the light, and to let everyone see what had been hidden in shadows. As I stood there watching the room ripple with shock, anger, and disbelief, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The weight I had carried alone for weeks, the suspicion, the hurt, the sleepless nights, was finally released. Not because Michael or Hannah had been punished, but because truth had its moment. By the time the luncheon ended, several things were clear. Michael's respect and credibility in that social space were diminished. Hannah's family had confronted the reality of her choices. I had reclaimed my voice, my position, and my dignity. I didn't storm out in triumph. I didn't gloat. I simply collected my bag, nodded politely to those around me, and left, knowing the aftermath would unfold without me having to push it along. In that public moment, justice had quietly done its work, and I realized something: you don't always need revenge. Sometimes the exposure of truth is enough to restore balance. The drive home after the luncheon was quiet, but unlike before, the silence was soothing instead of suffocating. The sunlight hit the windshield just right, spilling across the dashboard, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my chest loosen. Michael didn't speak much, and neither did I. Words felt unnecessary. Everything had been said, through evidence, through action, through exposure. At home, I unpacked my bag, placed it neatly on the counter, and went into the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of the evening breeze, mingling with the faint scent of burnt toast from the morning. Ordinary things, everyday smells, they felt like a balm to my frayed nerves. I made tea, letting the water steep slowly, listening to the quiet hiss of the kettle, and in those ordinary moments, I began to feel the first flickers of healing. Over the next few weeks, life continued, but it was different. Michael moved out temporarily, staying at a friend's house while we figured out what our future would look like. Conversations were short, factual, calm. We weren't yelling or screaming anymore. We were planning, reflecting, and slowly untangling the mess that had been left behind. Hannah's family distanced themselves from her for a while. She tried to reach out, but the trust that had been shattered wasn't easily repaired. People make mistakes, yes, but some mistakes echo louder than others, and this one would be remembered. Friends reached out to me, offering support, sympathy, and advice. Some expressed shock that I had handled the situation publicly. Others quietly admired the quiet dignity with which I had revealed the truth. I realized then that the courage to act wasn't for them, it was for me. To reclaim myself, to reclaim my voice, and to assert my worth. I took the time to focus on myself. I started small, walks in the park, cooking meals I loved, revisiting old hobbies I had abandoned. Each day I felt a little lighter, I could breathe a little deeper, I could laugh a little more freely without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I also began writing again, filling notebooks with thoughts, reflections, and dreams I'd put aside during the turmoil. It was cathartic, pouring my heart onto paper, letting the ink carry away the anger, the hurt, and the lingering doubt. And slowly I found myself feeling whole again, not because the past was erased, but because I had chosen to reclaim my present. Healing didn't come easy, and it didn't come fast. But I discovered something important. Betrayal does not define who you are, it reveals what you need to face, to confront, and to understand. Confrontation doesn't have to be cruel. Truth, shown with calm and dignity, speaks louder than anger ever could. Pain can be transformed into strength, not by crushing others, but by lifting yourself back to your own feet. Life moves forward, whether we like it or not, and the choice is always in how we step into it, with bitterness or with clarity. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't always about the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's about giving yourself permission to let go, to stop carrying what isn't yours to bear. I haven't forgiven Michael fully, and I may never forgive Hannah, but I have forgiven myself for trusting, for loving fully, for believing in a marriage that deserved truth, and for finding the courage to face reality with clarity and grace. Months later, the house feels lighter. Morning sunlight pours through the windows unopposed, and the kitchen smells like coffee and cinnamon rolls instead of tension and fear. I sit at the table, sipping tea, feeling the weight of the past as a distant memory rather than a present threat. I've learned to notice the small things again, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards, the way wind shifts leaves outside the window. Life is full of these small, ordinary moments that are quietly miraculous. And in these moments, I have found peace. I have learned to trust myself again, to honor my instincts and to carry my dignity as my shield. The storm has passed and I am here, standing quietly in the aftermath, stronger than I ever knew I could be. I sit here now, in the quiet of my home, sipping tea as the afternoon sun filters softly through the curtains. The house is calm, filled with ordinary sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the distant chatter of neighbors outside. It's the kind of peace that comes after storms, subtle and steady, and it makes me think about how fragile trust really is, and how resilient the human heart can be. Looking back, I see now that confrontation doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes, showing the truth quietly, firmly, and without malice is enough. It's enough to peel away illusions, to reveal what's real, and to let justice, whether social, emotional, or personal, take its natural course. I have learned that healing isn't about erasing the past or forgetting the people who hurt you. It's about reclaiming yourself, about noticing the small, ordinary moments that make life worth living again, about trusting your instincts, honoring your dignity, and letting the truth guide you forward. To those of you listening, I want to ask, how would you respond if you found yourself in a similar situation? Would you stay silent? Would you confront? Or would you, like me, find the courage to let truth speak, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how public? We all carry storms in our hearts, but it is in how we step out of the storm that our strength is revealed. Take your courage with you, protect your dignity. And remember, even in the aftermath of betrayal, peace is possible if you choose it. If my story resonates with you, if it gives you hope, clarity, or even a moment of reflection, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me your story, tell me what you would have done, and if you want to hear more stories of truth, resilience, and the quiet strength of ordinary people, subscribe and join me here again. Because sometimes, the hardest storms show us the brightest light.